Detective Harris stood in the dimly lit kitchen, the smell of stale coffee mixing with the faint scent of lavender from the living room. The house was too quiet, especially for one where a man had died just hours earlier. Thomas Reed, a respected history teacher, had been found dead in his study. No signs of forced entry. No apparent struggle. Just a toppled chair, a shattered glass, and a lifeless body slumped over the desk. His wife, his second wife Melissa, was in tears when the police arrived. "I found him like this," she whispered, hugging her stepdaughter tightly. But something didn't sit right with Harris. Thomas had been in perfect health. And Melissa, well, her tears were perfect too. Almost too perfect. Suspicion naturally fell on the new wife. A significant life insurance policy had just been updated in her name. And the neighbors had mentioned arguments, quiet but intense. Still, it was all circumstantial. Nothing concrete. Then came the unexpected twist, from the smallest person in the house. As Harris knelt to speak with little Emily, Thomas's 6-year-old daughter, she clutched her teddy bear tightly and looked up at him with big, trusting eyes. "Daddy always read me stories at night," she said softly. "But last night, he said his tea tasted funny." Harris blinked. "His tea?" Emily nodded. "Mommy made it. But not real mommy. New mommy. She said it was special sleepy tea, just for grown-ups." The room went silent. Melissa froze across the room, her face draining of color. "Did he drink it?" Harris asked gently. Emily nodded again. "He made a yucky face. Said it was bitter. Then he went to his study and didn't come back." That was the clue Harris needed. A toxicology report later confirmed it. The tea had been laced with a slow-acting poison. "Enough to make it look like a natural death, if not for one chills innocent honesty." Melissa was arrested a week later. She never spoke a word during the trial. But Emily did. She told the court all about her bedtime stories, and how she missed her dad's silly voices. Sometimes, it's the smallest voice that tells the biggest truth. Months had passed since the trial. Melissa was behind bars, sentenced to life for the murder of Thomas Reed. The case had made headlines, the stepmother who poisoned for profit. But for Detective Harris, it wasn't the case itself that stayed with him. It was Emily. The little girl had moved in with her aunt, Thomas's younger sister, Claire. A kind woman, but a stranger to Emily nonetheless. At night, she still clutched her teddy bear tight, waiting for a bedtime story that never quite sounded like Dad's. But something else lingered too, a question. Emily often drew pictures with crayons. Houses, flowers, stick figure families. But sometimes, there were darker drawings. One day, Claire brought one to Detective Harris. "She said it's the night Daddy died," Claire said, placing the drawing on the table. Harris leaned in. It showed a cup of tea, a red X over it, and a small black bottle beside it labeled ZZZ. And standing in the doorway, barely visible, a figure with a phone. "Vous êtes?" Harris asked when he visited Emily. She tilted her head. "The man who broke the sleepy bottle." Harris froze. "What man?" Emily furrowed her brow, trying to remember. "He came when Mommy was making tea. He had gloves. He told her to hurry." This changed everything. Melissa hadn't acted alone. The new lead opened doors that had been quietly closed. Surveillance footage from the street revealed a car pulling into the driveway that night, just past 10 p.m. The plates were partially obscured, but a local traffic cam caught a better shot just blocks away. Registered to a man named Victor Lyle. A small-time pharmacist with a history of forging prescriptions, and a past connection to Melissa. They had once been business partners in a failed wellness startup. Quietly dissolved 2 years ago, right before Melissa married Thomas. Detective Harris now had a new suspect. He tracked Victor to a small cabin upstate, where he lived off the grid. When they arrested him, Victor's first words were, "I didn't mean to hurt the girl." He cracked easily. He had provided the poison, helped plan the scene, even offered to dispose of evidence, but Melissa had gone rogue, doubling the dose without his knowledge. When Thomas died faster than expected, Victor fled. The case was reopened. Victor testified, and Melissa was charged with conspiracy and premeditated murder in the first degree. This time, the jury took just 1 day to deliberate. Justice had come full circle. And Emily? She got a new beginning. Detective Harris kept visiting, even after the case closed. He brought her books. Sat with her during story time.
Made silly voice like her dad was at too.
One night, as she was drifting off to sleep, Emily whispered, "Did I help catch the bad guys?" Harris smiled. "You did more than that. You told the truth. And that saved others." Because sometimes, the biggest heroes wear pajamas and carry teddy bears. 10 years had passed since the night Emily Reed's innocent words cracked open a murder case. Now 16, Emily was quiet but sharp. She carried herself with a calmness that unsettled bullies and surprised teachers. Detective Harris still visited sometimes, though he was mostly retired now. She didn't talk about her past often, but she remembered everything. Especially that man. The one with the gloves and the bottle. The man who said, "Hurry." One afternoon, while organizing her aunt's attic, Emily came across a dusty box labeled Dad's Things. Inside were papers, old photographs, and a worn leather journal. She flipped it open. At first, it was just notes, grocery lists, lesson plans, half-written essays. But then she saw a name. VL Don't Trust.
Sometingsvrang.
Her heart skipped.
Victor Lüle.
The man who helped her stepmother kill her father. But the next page chilled her more. Melissa's been meeting someone secretly. He was in the startup, but I can't prove anything yet. I think she's hiding money, maybe more. Emily may be in danger if anything happens to me. It was dated just 2 weeks before he died. Her father had known, and no one had believed him.
Emily closed the journal slowly.
She sat in silence for a long time. Then, she picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in years. Detective Harris, the voice on the other end croaked, surprised. "Emily." "I found something," she said calmly.
My dad left a warning.
An hour later, Harris was on her doorstep. Emily showed him the journal, her fingers tracing the last few words her father ever wrote. "This doesn't just mean he suspected Melissa," Harris said, brows furrowed. "It means he suspected a bigger plan." Emily nodded. "Do you think they were planning to hurt me too?" Harris hesitated, then answered honestly. "If he wrote that, then yes." But the story wasn't over. Because Victor Lyle had taken a plea deal and walked free just a year earlier. He'd vanished. New name.
New city. And Melissa?
She never revealed who else might have been involved. Emily looked Harris in the eye. "I want to find him," she said. "All of them."
I want to know the truth. The whole truth.
Harris looked at her for a long moment. "You remind me of your dad," he said with a sad smile.
Smart. Brave. Too curious for your own good.
"I want justice," Emily said. "Not just for him. For me." Emily and Detective Harris became a team, an unlikely pair, bonded by loss and the fire of unfinished business. They dug into the old startup where Melissa and Victor once worked, Veritas Wellness. On the surface, it had been a failed health brand selling herbal supplements. But bank records told a different story: millions in private investments, then sudden wire transfers to offshore accounts. Someone had been laundering money, and Thomas Reed had been close to exposing it. That's why he had to die. Emily found emails in her father's old laptop backups. Password protected, but Harris knew a guy who could crack them. The messages told everything. Melissa had been receiving payments from a man named Daniel Trent, a former partner in the company. A name neither Emily nor Harris had heard before. Until now. Trent was living under a new identity in Europe. But he'd returned recently, under the radar, to settle unfinished business. Emily came up with the plan. She posted a message on an old tech forum connected to the startup community. A subtle breadcrumb, referencing a file called veritas_truthlog.zip, something Thomas had apparently encrypted before his death. In truth, it was a decoy.
A bait.
Days later, someone tried to access it.
And then came the message. What do you want? DT.
Harris took it to the authorities. But they needed more. So Emily replied,
I don't want money.
I want this to end. Meet me, or the file goes public. It was risky. But Trent took the bait. They met in an abandoned train station outside the city. Harris and the police were already in position, watching from afar. Trent was older now, colder. You're your father's daughter, he said, almost impressed.
Too clever for your own good.
Emily didn't flinch. You killed him.
You took ID forget.
Trent smiled.
It wasn't personal.
Those were his last words as a free man. The officers closed in. He didn't resist. He knew it was over. 6 months later, Emily stood beside her father's grave. A breeze passed through the trees. Spring was returning. Harris joined her, quietly. It's done, he said. All of them. Every name tied to Veritas is being prosecuted. Your father would be proud.
Emily placed a new journal on the headstone.
This one was hers. I've started writing again, she said softly. But it's not about pain. It's about truth. He nodded. Think you'll keep digging? She smiled faintly. I don't think I know how to stop.